Unfortunately, it feels like Ukraine is getting desperate. It is not a secret anymore that in order for Ukraine to win in this war, they need the support from other countries. They especially need weapons, ammunition and military vehicles. But recently, more and more countries are no longer showing the same levels of support as they did in the very beginning of this war. How important is it to get weapons to Ukraine from the West? Why the support is not that strong anymore? And will Ukraine still be able to win in this war? And these are the questions that we'll be talking about in today's video. What's up, investors, hot, and people of Reddit, it's the Russian Dude, and this is your daily update on Russian-Ukrainian war as of Tuesday, June 14th. You can see the main events of the day to my right, along with the timestamps. So, if you remember, in the beginning of the war, many Western countries were showing and talking about the unconditional support to Ukraine. They were basically talking about that they'll do everything possible to help Ukraine resist Russian invasion. And that is why Ukrainians, as well as other many people, were extremely optimistic about the chances of Ukraine in the future. And indeed, Ukraine has been resisting very well and using as many weapons that they received as possible. But recently, there are many signs that show us that the support of Western countries of Ukraine is decreasing. Specifically, the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, is now actively criticizing the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, because he cannot decide which country he wants to support. It is just one of the best examples here, but Germany was always talking about that they will support Ukraine no matter the cost. And yes, in the beginning it all sounded very promising, but these were just words. Germany was helping Ukraine and sending some weapons and military vehicles, but this has never been enough. And at the same time, Germany is always saying, yes, we will send it, just give us a little bit more time. And at the same time, Germany is still cooperating with Russia, at least in economic perspective. Another example of decreasing support of Ukraine is the statement by the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Mikhailo Podolyak. He was saying that among other weapons and military vehicles, Ukraine requires 1,000 howitzers so that it can effectively protect itself. And guess what? From these 1,000 required howitzers, Ukraine only received 7. Yes, it might sound like Ukraine becomes demanding and disrespectful, but just think about this. Ukraine is not asking for weapons to invade other country. Ukraine is asking for weapons simply to protect itself and save lives. And the response to that is the typical response of politicians. On words they say, yes, we're gonna support you, but there are no actions. This statement is also confirmed by the Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Anna Malyar, is that Ukraine only received approximately 10% of required weapons. She basically says that Ukraine is already doing everything it can to protect itself from Russia. But no matter what, Russia is a much bigger country in all aspects. And this includes obviously the number of people, the number of weapons, number of military vehicles and so on. And because of this, unfortunately, most likely Ukraine will not be able to protect itself alone. Ukraine needs the support from the West. Just think about it, how much bigger Russia is in comparison to Ukraine. And just the idea that Ukraine is still effectively resisting Russian invasion is already incredible enough. And all of this that is happening right now is with this limited supply of weapons. Once again, just imagine how easy it will become for Ukraine if they get all the weapons that they're requesting. But maybe it's a little bit understandable the position of Western politicians, especially the position of the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, because his country has been already through 2 world wars. And let's be honest, the reputation of Germany after these wars was not so good. So in my personal understanding, I think that Olaf Scholz is being extremely careful about anything military related. And at the same time, if there are similar doubts in the heads of Western politicians, Zelensky assures them all is that Ukraine will not use their weapons to attack Russia. He once again reinforces the idea that Ukraine needs these weapons simply to protect themselves. And so yes, this was just me talking about the main and direct assistance, which is the military support. But according to Alexei Arestovich, all the other ways of supporting Ukraine, including putting sanctions against Russia, is no longer effective as well. He's basically talking about that Russia learned how they can live with sanctions. Russia is big and pretty much self-sustainable country, that is why these sanctions need to be much more aggressive. He was then also talking about this massacre in Bucha which happened a couple of months ago, and that all the political leaders, or at least it seemed like, they were very angry against Putin. But in reality, several weeks passed and almost nothing happened. Eventually, and unfortunately, it even feels like that many people simply forgot about this literal massacre. And that is exactly why, according to Alexei Arestovich, Russia thinks that there are no consequences to their actions. Russia thinks that they can continue war on the territory of Ukraine and basically nothing will happen. Worst case scenario, there will be some kind of sanctions, but Russia will overcome them as well. And that is why Russia is trying to annex even more Ukrainian territories and even started issuing Russian passports and forcing Ukrainians to take Russian citizenships. Because once again, the only counteraction from the West to this action by Russia is that they said that they simply will not accept Russian passports. People, the war is not yet over. Ukraine needs our support. Just because we're not talking about it as much anymore does not mean that every day hundreds of people die. So if there's any kind of influence that you have, please make this position to be heard. Please show your support and especially please raise the awareness because Ukraine needs you. And by the way, if you like this style of daily news reporting, feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please make sure to check the link in the description if you wish to support Ukraine with us. You will get additional content and all the proceeds will be donated to Ukraine at the end of each month. Thanks so much and let's continue. Today, the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, was speculating on the potential topics how the relations between Ukraine and Russia will look like in the future. And the main topic of this conversation was basically about whether the peace between Ukraine and Russia is possible as soon as Putin is no longer in power. And the main argument of Zelensky in this case was basically about whether the people of Russia are ready for a bright future. He basically said in case Russia wants to become finally a good country and well-developed country, then why not? Then of course there might be peace between Russia and Ukraine. But in case Russia wants to remain this closed one big government, then I guess why would even Ukraine try to establish relations with Russia? What Zelensky means here is that it will all depend on who will be in power after Putin. And he hopes that the people of Russia, I mean the regular people of Russia, will finally start thinking about their future as integrated country in the world. Welcome to another episode of Ridiculous Russian Propaganda. And today we have the statement of the Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Anna Malyar, who said that Ukraine is not planning to mobilize women into their army, which is pretty normal statement to make considering this fact that around the world in many countries serving in the army is not even mandatory. But there are some countries, for example like Russia and Ukraine, where men have to go to the army. But yes, it's only about men. Women do not have to go to the army unless they want to. And so basically Russia took this statement and they started spreading this among Russian news media and saying, look at these Ukrainians, they are not even willing to defend their own motherland. They are basically going off and saying things like, oh come on, regular Ukrainians already understand that if they're going to fight for Ukraine, they're gonna be defending Nazis. And it's like not a single normal person will do this. And at the same time, just a reminder, at this very moment in Russia there is a hidden mobilization, which basically means that people are tricked into going to Ukraine. And besides that, the morale and willingness of regular Russians to go to serve in the army is at extremely low levels. So it's like, I'm not sure if you've seen these videos, but there was this one reporter who was walking around and asking Russian men two different questions. First of all, he was asking whether they support Russia in this war. And the majority of men were saying, yes, of course, we need to defeat the war from Nazis and we need to liberate Ukraine. And the next question that the reporter was asking the same men is whether they are ready to go to war to Ukraine and help Russia meet its goals. And guess what? The majority of men were saying, oh no, we have this contract people, we have soldiers, we have the army, why would I need to go to the war? And yes, once again, this will be the same people who will be criticizing Ukraine because no one is willing to defend their own country. Alright people, right now I'll be using the map to show you the most recent events events and battles that happened between Russia and Ukraine recently. First of all, there are several reports that Russia is actively bombing the city of Kharkov. The majority of Russian forces are advancing from the northwest of this city, and it is estimated that they want to take this region so that they can reunite with the rest of the forces in the city of Izium. And later on, they are thinking about using these reinforcements to help in the battle siege of the city of Severodonetsk. But right now, Ukraine is holding their ground in this region, so reinforcements of Russia are not coming in the nearest future. Now let's zoom a little bit closer so I can give you updates about the major battle of this war, the battle for the city of Severodonetsk. As you might remember, the majority of Russian forces are now coming from the north of this city, and it is estimated that another big reinforcements of Russia will come from Izium region. But right now, Ukrainian forces are demonstrating significant resistance approximately in the region of the city of Slavyansk. That is why Russia cannot send too many reinforcements from the city of Izium. There are also several reports that Ukraine is successfully counterattacking from the west of city of Izium, and at this very moment they are approximately 10 kilometers away from this city. So, in case Ukraine is successful in this direction, Russia might lose its western reinforcements. And another direction where Russia wants to attack the city of Severodonetsk is from the south of this region. But right now, Russia is not making any significant progress in this direction. That is why the only direction where Russia attacks the city of Severodonetsk is still the north and northeast of this city. And now let's quickly transport to the south of Ukraine, where the most successful counteroffensive of Ukraine at this moment, counteroffensive against the city of Kherson, is happening right now. So the area is still technically occupied by Russians. But because the presence of Russian forces in this region decreased significantly, Ukraine is able to launch many successful counterattacks. One of the most recent successful counterattacks of Ukrainians was the recapturing of the town of Tamina Balka. And it is also estimated that at this very moment Ukrainian forces are approximately only 10 kilometers away from the city of Kherson. So without a doubt, Ukraine is doing a significant progress in the south of its own country, and we can see the liberation of the south in the nearest future. Today, in his daily conversation with Ukrainians, the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich, was basically comparing Putin with the previous Soviet government and saying the mistakes that Putin is making in this war. He basically said that one of the biggest mistakes in the head of Putin at this very moment is that he thinks that he is some kind of Stalin and he has this unconditional support of people of Russia, which is, according to Arestovich, is the first mistake. The second mistake goes basically from the first one. Whenever Stalin was in power, he definitely had much bigger support from the Soviet people, and some things were just more strict. And because of this, Stalin had approximately 27 million people at his disposal who he could have just mobilized to the army at any point. And that is why basically Stalin was, let's call it, successful in the Second World War. Because he was just using the tactics of pushing with numbers with almost no regards to human life and achieving the goals at no matter the cost. Which is almost exactly the same what we see at this very moment that Putin is trying to do. With the only one big difference is that Putin does not have, once again, 27 million people to do this. And for this reason, this tactic is obviously no longer viable. And the third mistake of Putin, according to Arestovich, is that at this very moment Russia does not have that much support from other countries, especially what he was talking about is this Lend-Lease Act. Because during the Second World War, USSR was the beneficiary of the Lend-Lease Act by America, which basically means that they were getting weapons from America to help them defeat Nazistic Germany. But right now, Russia can only count almost only on its own weapons and military vehicles, which are obviously in finite supply. Today, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia made a statement under which they say that Putin approved the emergency batch of wheat to Afghanistan in case they need it. Which is like, we already know all this dire situation of the wheat on the world market, and Russia is saying that okay, if Afghanistan needs this, we'll be more than happy to send it there. And at the same time, the origins of this wheat are also pretty shady. Because I'm pretty sure that you all heard about this thing, is that Russia is basically stealing Ukrainian wheat. And by doing this, Russia is accumulating even more wheat supplies so they can use this as a blackmail in the future. And so, like mentioned previously, one of the countries that can potentially get this wheat from Russia will be the country of Afghanistan. And besides that, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia mentioned that they will think about recognizing Taliban in Afghanistan as the official government political party. Which basically means that in the nearest future, the next potential ally for Russia can be Afghanistan Taliban. Today, the leader of China, Xi Jinping signed a non-war military operation order. This was done in response to increasing activity of Taiwan about recognizing its independence. And as I'm sure the majority of you already know about this, there have been significant problems between China and Taiwan in the recent history. Basically what happened is that Taiwan separated from China and they acknowledged their own independence. And China obviously doesn't like it. Taiwan is this small island next to China and they decided to develop their country in Western traditions. But at the same time, China is going in accordance with communistic traditions. And as you can imagine, communism and Western ideologies, they simply do not match. And so recently Taiwan started speaking once again about its independence, and Western countries, including America, started supporting this point of view, which made China even more angry. And so because of this, there are now many rumors that China might start its own special military operation in Taiwan, just like the same as Russia against Ukraine. And the main purpose of this special military operation will be to not let Taiwan become independent. Today, in the first reading, the Parliament of Russia has adopted the law which makes it illegal to pay for goods and services using crypto assets. And what I'm obviously talking about here is, for example, the usage of Bitcoin on the territory of Russia. So far it looks like, okay, you can buy it, you can maybe sell it later, but you will no longer be able to use it as actual money. In my understanding, what this means is that all these transactions which are made using crypto assets will no longer be considered as legal. So let's say, so if you're buying a car using Bitcoin, and let's say so technically you will be able to do this, the transfer of the ownership will not be considered to be legal. Thank you so much for your attention, check the link in the description, stay safe and see you tomorrow.